We are back on the road to City Hall. My next guest spent 8 years in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, where he served as an assistant district attorney. Now he's trying to make the jump to Brooklyn District Attorney. He's running in a Democratic primary against longtime Brooklyn DA Charles Hines and defense attorney Ken Thompson. Joining us now to talk about what separates him from his two opponents, we've got Abe George here. Good to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Good evening, Errol. Thanks for having me.
What made you decide you left your job in the Manhattan DA's office? You'd been a narcotics prosecutor. You'd done a whole bunch of cases over the years. Why did you leave?
Well, I'm a lifelong Brooklynite. I'm a first-generation American. My parents came here from India. They were public servants themselves. My mom and dad worked for Coney Island Hospital for a number of years. I became a public servant back in 2004 when Robert Morgenthau, the venerable prosecutor, probably the most respected prosecutor in the nation, hired me. Spent 8 years there, mostly focusing on violent crime, gangs, narcotics, solving cold case homicides. And part of my experience in the office, I was assigned to a citywide task force that worked on solving narcotics, crimes, and violence throughout the 5 boroughs. And I took that opportunity to focus on Brooklyn. We cleaned up a housing project in Brownsville. I led an investigation to clean up the Noble Drew Ali housing project, which prior to us being involved was rated one of the 10 most dangerous housing projects in the city. And it was with that experience that I realized and I saw the difference in levels of prosecution. This citywide task force was doing a better job at fighting Brooklyn crime than the Brooklyn DA's office. And then I started to take a closer look at what was happening in Brooklyn, and I realized that Brooklyn was in a crisis. We led the city in homicides and shootings year after year. We saw a Brooklyn DA's office that was allowing NYPD policies such as stop and frisk and the over-prosecution of marijuana cases to solve that violent crime. We saw wrongful convictions, cases like Jabbar Collins becoming par for the course for the office. We saw a district attorney that looked the other way in political corruption by not investigating his ally, Vito Lopez. And most shockingly, about a year ago, as the New York Times explored, we saw a DA that wasn't prosecuting child sexual offenders in the Orthodox community because it would cost him votes. And Errol, I decided that the children and the people of Brooklyn needed someone to fight for them. And that's why I'm running.
Okay, that is quite a case you just laid out there. I don't know if we can get to all of it, but let's start with marijuana and stop and frisk. What would you do different if you were the district attorney?
Okay, day one, how we would combat stop and frisk is if there's an arrest that's produced from stop and frisk, let's have the police officer himself come down to the office and scrutinize that officer's testimony to see if the officer himself has followed the constitutional bounds of the law to protect our citizens. Part two of that involves marijuana. Marijuana for a long time has been a justification for stop and frisk. When someone stopped, you recover marijuana, a lot of times police officers were charging them, rather than a violation for it being in your pocket, for a crime because it's out in plain view. We don't need to wait for the state legislature to act. As district attorney, I would say that we would not prosecute those cases as crimes. If there's a small amount of marijuana out in plain view, we would prosecute those cases solely as a violation.
But now when the police commissioner, Ray Kelly, says that these are vital tools in getting the record low level of homicides that we have now. Do you just not believe him, or do you think there's another way to do it?
I don't think that we abandoned stop and frisk, but we just follow the bounds of the law. What did we see last year? 0.1% of 500,000 people stopped. We only had a gun recovered in 0.1% of the cases. There's got to be a smarter way to prosecute those cases. I would approach those cases in an intelligence-based approach. What we would do is coordinate with the different units of the police department and with the community, with the family courts, with social media, and the DA's office would develop a blueprint in how we're going to combat crime. Who are the problem players in each community, and the DA's office would take the lead in how we're going to combat crime.
Let me move on. You also say on your website that you want to form an identity theft unit that
Correct.
the DA's office currently lacks. Do other offices like Manhattan, do they have that?
Manhattan DA's office, cyber crimes is one of the fastest emerging crimes in the nation. And the Brooklyn DA's office, as it stands right now, doesn't have a cyber crimes and identity theft unit. That'd be a definite platform. As soon as I'm elected, we'd form.
Let me ask you, because it's a political race, you got a $45,000 contribution from David Boies,
yeah.
the famous attorney. Now, you didn't have any prior relationship with him. He's not a mentor or a friend or a classmate or anything like that. But that's a pretty substantial amount of money, and a substantial amount of the money that you've raised so far. What's that about?
That was the maximum contribution someone could give. And as you pointed out, I didn't know David Boies. I actually cold called to try to get to his office, found someone that knew David. He gave me an hour of his time. I laid out the problems as I discussed in the beginning, told him what my solutions were, and told him why I was running. And within a few weeks, I was sent the maximum contribution someone can give.
Now, is that all there is to it? Because the other theory that goes around is that your former employer, Cy Vance, who has sort of gone head-to-head with Ken Thompson, the third person in this race, might have convinced David Boies to give you this money as a way to sort of get back at his nemesis, Ken Thompson.
No, please, I wish it was that easy that someone's calling. And first of all, you ran for office. You know how hard it is to get money.
A million years ago.
You know how hard it is to raise money. And if that was the case, I'd have a substantial amount more money than in the bank account. This was purely a meeting where he met me and believed my vision of how I could reform the Brooklyn DA's office.
And I guess one last thing that you talked about is a conviction integrity unit.
Correct.
That you like to create. Here again, are there other local district attorneys' offices that have this?
It took Joe Hines almost 22 years to form his own conviction integrity unit. And what have we seen? We've seen cases like Jabbar Collins, where a man spent 16 years of his life for a crime he didn't commit. And clearly, there's a dysfunctional unit in that office that's not looking and really trying to resolve these cases to ensure that the convictions that we've obtained, there's integrity to them.
Why do you need a separate unit, though? Isn't there something called, like, getting it right the first time or having somebody else look over the case before you wrongly send somebody off to prison for 20 years?
Look, I'd hope that happens in every case that we prosecute, but there's certain cases where mistakes are made, and we've seen that happen in Brooklyn time and time again. Cases like William Lopez, that where a federal judge essentially asked the defendant been released because he spent 23 years in jail for a crime he didn't commit. Ronald Bozeman, a guy that spent a year in jail because exculpatory information wasn't revealed to the defense. This is a big priority of my administration. We're going to form a conviction integrity unit where we actually take a second look at some of the cases where there are allegations of actual innocence and actually get that unit to work.
Okay, it's your first time running for office. We'll wish you the best of luck. We'll see you out there on the campaign trail. Thanks
I appreciate it.
It is time for a break. Coming up, we'll talk with the two filmmakers behind an Academy Award-nominated documentary about New Yorkers who survived by redeeming nickel deposits on bottles and cans. Also tonight, we'll ask the four members of our Reporters Roundtable what role, if any, the Democratic candidates for mayor played in ending the school bus strike. Don't go away.